Welcome, everyone, to Deny, Delay, Depose, Health Over Wealth. Another week, another set of headlines that frankly make my stomach churn. Are we just going to keep accepting this as normal?
Yeah, well, let's just say they're developing rapidly. It's like watching a pressure cooker, and I think the lid is about to blow. These headlines, they're not just isolated incidents, they're symptoms of a much bigger shift, a radical transformation that's on the horizon, whether we like it or not.
Okay, hold on a minute. I think radical transformation is a bit dramatic, isn't it? Pressure cooker, too. I see these news items as challenges, definitely, but challenges within a system that, despite its flaws, still delivers a lot of good. We can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Delivers a lot of good to whom exactly? Because I look at this story about the Israeli settlers killing a U.S. citizen in the West Bank, and I think how much of that is fueled by desperation, by lack of opportunity, by a feeling of utter hopelessness. And that feeling, that breeds violence, that bleeds into everything, including healthcare. We can't disconnect these things. That death, my care of good, tragic as it, is linked to systemic failures, a lack of access, maybe even denial of mental health support. Things that boil over the support, things that boil over.
Exactly. It's all connected. The violence in the West Bank, the Air India crash, even the USEP firings. It's chaos. Think about the Air India crash, this preliminary report saying fuel was cut off to both engines. Someone asked someone else why he flipped the switch, and then Trump threatening 30% tariffs on the EU and Mexico. All these things are symptoms of a system on the brink, a system where human life is expendable, where peace is just a bargaining chip, and profit is the only god.
Whoa, slow down. You're jumping all over the place. A plane crash could be a mechanical failure, pilot error, sabotage. Let's not leap to some grand conspiracy. And tariffs? That's economics, trade negotiations. It's not necessarily about making human life expendable. It could be about protecting domestic industries, leveling the playing field.
Protecting domestic industries at what cost? That 30% tariff, who's going to pay for that? The consumer, right? And who are the consumers? People struggling to make ends meet, people one medical bill away from bankruptcy. It's all connected. It's about priorities. Are we prioritizing human well-being or are we prioritizing something else?
And the USEP firings. Think about it. An institute dedicated to peace is systematically dismantled. That's not just some bureaucratic reshuffling. That's a deliberate act, a statement that peace isn't a priority. That conflict, that profit from conflict, is more important. Where does that money that was funding peace building go? Likely somewhere in the military-industrial complex or something. That directly affects healthcare, because a world at war is a world with fewer resources for healing, for preventative care, for mental health.
Okay, I see your point about the USIP firings being concerning, and how potentially could impact healthcare indirectly. It's not ideal to have it dismantled, and I'm willing to meet you both halfway. It does raise questions about resource allocation and priorities. I still think linking everything to a single grand narrative of systemic failure is an oversimplification. The world is complex, there are competing interests, unintended consequences. You can't just boil it all down to profit equals evil.
It's not about saying profit is inherently evil. It's about saying that when profit is the only consideration, when it trumps human well-being, then we have a problem. We've incentivized the wrong thing. When insurance companies are incentivized to deny claims, when pharmaceutical companies are incentivized to price gouge, when hospitals are incentivized to prioritize lucrative procedures over preventative care, that's a system designed to fail the people it's supposed to serve.
Exactly. It's about incentives. Look at the Air India crash. What if there was pressure on the pilots to cut corners, to save fuel, to meet some impossible efficiency target dictated by shareholders? Maybe that's why there are so many questions still unanswered. The black box tells one story, but the full story is likely buried under layers of corporate greed and regulatory failures.
Now that's speculation. I can see how financial pressures could contribute to safety lapses. I think it's important to acknowledge the safety regulations are there and they do exist. There are redundancies built in to prevent accidents. But to say that corporate greed caused that crash, that's a big leap. Regulations exist for a reason, and blaming solely profit motive is a gross oversimplification.
But are the regulations effective? Are they being enforced? And are the penalties for violating those regulations strong enough to deter companies from prioritizing profit over safety? I think there's a serious question to be asked here. And that applies across the board, not just to aviation.
And what about the long-term consequences? These short-sighted decisions, driven by profit, they create a ripple effect of trauma and instability. That trauma manifests in physical and mental health problems. It puts a strain on the healthcare system. It creates a cycle of despair that's incredibly difficult to break. Think about the people who have family in the war-torn countries. They might not even be able to afford therapy.
Okay, I can see how these events are indirectly related. War, conflict, trade wars definitely cause stress and anxieties that can impact people's health. And yeah, maybe the current system isn't fully equipped to handle the added layer of complexity. Maybe we need more resources devoted to mental health services, especially in underserved communities.
More resources and a different approach. Throwing money at the problem isn't enough. We need to fundamentally rethink how we deliver mental health care. It needs to be accessible, affordable, and destigmatized. It needs to be integrated into primary care, not treated as some separate, specialized thing. And it needs to address the root causes of mental illness, which are often social and economic.
Yes, and we need to empower communities to take control of their own health. We need to move away from this top-down, profit-driven model and create a system that is truly patient-centered, where individuals are active participants in their own care, not just passive recipients of treatment.
Okay, I agree with some of that. Patient-centered care is definitely important, and empowering communities, I can see the value in that. But how do you scale that up? How do you implement that kind of system on a national level? And how do you pay for it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or rather, the trillion-dollar question. But the answer, I believe, lies in shifting our priorities, in recognizing that healthcare is not a commodity, but a fundamental human right, in moving towards a universal healthcare system like Medicare for all. It might seem radical, but I believe it's the only way to truly address the systemic failures that are plaguing our society.
Absolutely. Medicare for all, or some other form of universal healthcare, is the only way to level the playing field, to ensure that everyone has access to the care they need, regardless of their income, their zip code, or their employment status. The status quo has failed, and that's not my opinion. Just look at the news.
Okay, but universal healthcare, there are trade-offs. Higher taxes, potential for longer wait times, government bureaucracy. I mean, it's not a magic bullet. And how do you deal with innovation? How do you incentivize pharmaceutical companies to develop new drugs if they can't make a profit?
Those are valid concerns, but I think they can be addressed. Higher taxes, yes, but they would be offset by the elimination of premiums, deductibles, and co-pays. Longer wait times, maybe initially, but with proper funding and efficient management, that can be minimized. And as for innovation, we can explore alternative funding models for pharmaceutical research. We like public grants or nonprofit organizations. The point is, we can't let the fear of the unknown paralyze us. We have to be willing to consider bold solutions, even if they challenge our assumptions.
And think about the economic benefits of a healthier population. People who aren't burdened by medical debt, people who are able to access preventative care, are more productive, more engaged, more able to contribute to society. Healthcare isn't just an expense, it's an investment.
Okay, I see your point about preventative care and the long-term economic benefits, but I still worry about the practicalities of transitioning to a completely different system. It's a huge undertaking. There's so much that could go wrong.
Of course, it's a huge undertaking, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. We have to start somewhere. And the first step, I think, is to change the narrative, to stop thinking of healthcare as a privilege and start thinking of it as a right, to demand that our elected officials prioritize human well-being over corporate profits, to hold them accountable when they don't.
And to remember the human cost of inaction, the stories behind the headlines, the people who are suffering, the people who are dying, because of a system that values profit over their lives. We can't let their sacrifices be in vain. We have to fight for a better future, a future where health is truly prioritized over wealth.
I do think change is needed. I guess I am a little more hesitant about the method on how to approach this. We have to find common ground and more research, lots of research, to see what is the real solution.
More research, yes, but not as a stall tactic. We need to act. The time for incremental change is over. Now we can deny, delay, depose the system that is in place.
Exactly. We need a transformation. And it's coming, one way or another. The pressure is building. And the headlines, they're just the first cracks in the dam.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. And remember, health over wealth, it's not just a slogan, it's a call to action.
Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep fighting for a better world.
Thanks for having me. Stay informed, and hopefully we can find a common ground that works.
Onwards and upwards, everyone. Thank you, Sarah and Otto. See you next week.